Hello folks, Ariel over here at Finest, where today we are harvesting beets. Well, actually a few days ago we got this harvested, and now today I'm doing the processing and canning of them. Thankfully I got them out of the ground before the snow came in. I grew 3 kinds of beets this year. You can kind of see the difference in the leaves. The first pile I pulled were Early Wonders. They're a dark red beet. What I'm pulling right now are Candy Stripe, Candy Cane, or Choiga beets. People call them by different names. Those are all the same thing. That's what I'm still pulling here. They're a kind of pink and white striped in concentric circles when you cut them open. When they're raw, they're beautiful, beautiful beets. And then the third one is golden beets, which I also really like. I enjoy the flavors and colors of all of them. Overall, the beets did really well in the garden this year. We ate quite a few through the course of the summer, pulling the biggest ones and leaving the smaller ones to get larger before this day, but there was quite a few left, and I knew I'd need to get them out of the ground before it froze solid, so that's what I am doing here. This year I tried planting like 3 or 4 seeds in a single hole and then pulling the largest ones as they got bigger. Several people suggested their beets seemed to do really well that way. They did okay. I don't know that I'll do that again. I think they do better being a little bit more spread out, which is what I have normally done. You know, 1 seed and then move over and another seed and so on. But that was an experiment. We did get really, really good crops of the Candy Stripe and the golden beets. The Early Wonders I've grown before with no issues and really like them, so I'm not sure what happened this year. We had quite a few that bolted and tried to make seeds, and quite a few, those are golden beets that I'm cleaning up here, and all those tops and little root ends and stuff go in the compost, which will then go back into the garden to nourish the soil for future crops. Anyway, this year those dark red ones, some of them bolted, some came up actually white with a very woody taproot instead of being dark red at all, and some of the others just didn't make a very nice root shape. I don't know if I got a little bit of a bad seed packet. I haven't had that experience before. I've grown quite a few different kinds of red beets and never had any of them behave quite like that particular pack of seeds did this year. So I'm not sure what happened with them, but we got some of them and we got really good crops of the other 2. So this was the beet harvesting, and now we're going to go on to the next steps. And if you're wondering, I did weigh them kind of approximately, and that little bed you saw me pull all these out of added up to about 50 pounds of beets for the year. Oh, hi, baby. Can you shake? Okay. Hi, folks. Ariel over here. So we got all the beets out of the garden before it snowed, and now it's snowing. And has been for several days. I'm trying to catch up on dealing with all of the stuff that I got pulled out before it snowed, and it's been in the teens at night, and looks like we got single digits at night coming. So it was probably my last chance to get things out of the soil before everything was frozen. So what I'm doing with these beets, we've eaten a lot in different ways, is steaming them slightly so they will peel. So I've got various colors here. You can probably see these are golden beets. I love golden beets. They're one of my favorites. These are Candy Stripe, though when you cook them, the pink and white stripes kind of blend. I've got some red beets just turning on in here right now. We're just going to steam them just enough that the peels slide off. And over here I've got actually the rest of the Candy Stripe ones I need to finish peeling. So I've cooked these till they steamed just a little bit, and the beet's not super soft inside, but as you can see it makes the peel pretty soft, and you can kind of mush it off with your hands that way. These are some more of the candy striped ones, so they're kind of a pink, and I think that's the easiest way to peel them. Now what we're doing with these is making like a sweet and soured pickled beet. Hi Pollywug, you don't actually like beets. I don't think you do. This is my grandmother's recipe. My parents didn't make this a lot when I was growing up, actually, because my father doesn't like beets, or I think he would tell you they don't sit well with him, but I do, and we eat a lot of them through the year. And pickling them is one great way to preserve extras at this time of year when you got to get everything out of the garden kind of all at once. And so once we get the last batch there of the red beets cooked as well, we're going to make our sweet and sour sauce, or liquid. It's basically vinegar and salt and sugar. And then sometimes you get just a little bit there on an edge that just didn't cook quite long enough to want to come clean with just your fingers. And we are going to can these, and then they will be the pantry shelves waiting for whenever we want to enjoy them through the winter and into next year till we have another crop of beets going. So that is what I am working on here. And we'll check back in a minute when the rest are steamed and we're on to the next step. You should just be able to kind of squeeze them like that and everything pops off. Sometimes there's a little root hair sticking through. I use my fingernail for a sec, but for the most part they just pop clean. As you can see, some are a little lighter and some are a little darker, but none of these are as dark as red beets are. Okay, so we've got all of our beets peeled, steamed, and we are going to mix up our brine. So my grandmother was more like me. It wasn't much for writing down recipes. When I asked my mom to see if any of her sisters had this recipe, I got back something that looks like about like what I do. 3 to 4 cups of vinegar to 4 to 5 cups of water with 3 to 4 cups of sugar, salt and pepper to taste, and then use as much liquid brine with the beets as you like, whether you like more beets or more brine. So I may have to mix up a little more, but I'm doing basically a double batch of that here to start with. So that was apple cider vinegar. That's not the raw stuff, but it's not going to be raw after. This is canned anyway, so I'm just using the cheaper stuff. So we got our vinegar. I'm going to add water. What I'm actually doing is I did 8 cups of vinegar. I'm doing 8 cups of water. So that alone would be a gallon of brine, but that's going to do way more than 4 quart jars because the majority of the volume is going to be taken up with the mass of the beets themselves. So this is some ground black pepper. That's probably a tablespoon. 2 tablespoons. We're going to call that plenty. Salt. Usually use Redmond Real, but somebody gave me this Himalayan, so I'm going to just use up some of that. About 2 teaspoons per batch. We're going to call that 2 and add another 2. And because this is going to be kind of a sweet and sour brine, we are going to use some sugar. 3 to 4 cups, that would make it on the sweeter side for sure. And I don't really need that, so I'm going to do probably a scant 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, well, that would be for one portion. I am doubling this, so let's do 1, 2. Little spoons right there because I put a little sugar and vinegar in the toilet bucket whenever I change it. So we need to refill that jar. So that's a very scant 6, probably closer to 5 cups of sugar is what I did. Now we're going to get that brine hot. I've already got over here in the canner. Can't usually do this when I'm doing big loads of stuff, but this is going to be a smaller batch, not hundreds of pounds. So I actually have my first set of canning jars just upside down in the steam bath canner there, with it heating up just to have them hot and sterilized. If I was running load after load, I wouldn't be able to use the canner for that, but for at least getting this first one going, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get the brine hot, and in the meantime I'm going to dice up the beets, and then we're going to pack them in jars, cover them with hot brine, and get them canned. So as you can see, this is pretty simple. Picking the beets and washing the beets and all of that takes way more time than actually putting this together. Okay, got all those diced up. Brine's pretty hot. These jars are nice and hot. And of course you could heat them in, you know, just wash them in very hot water, dip them in boiling water. You could put them in a dishwasher and run like a rinse and dry cycle if you've got one of those. Or at least a rinse cycle. Whew, they're hot, which is what we wanted. Like with most canning things, we want hot stuff going hot, hot, hot. So the beets are still warm. They're not super hot from, you know, having been steamed and peeled. And we've got our 3 different colors here. If I mixed them together, they'd all end up the shade of the red beets, because that dye is so powerful that it would overwhelm everything else. Now my aunt said that they like to do lots of brine and a lesser amount of juice, because, or lots of brine and lesser amount of beets, because they really like to have lots of juice, because then they make red beet eggs, which I think is a Pennsylvania Dutch thing I grew up with, where you take your leftover beet juice, usually the red beet, the dark purple, and once you've eaten your pickled beets out of it, your hard-boiled eggs, and throw them into the leftover brine, which, if you let them sit in there for a few days, turns your hard-boiled egg bright purple on the outside, kind of sweet pickly, and creamy yellow on the inside. Anyway, we might do some of that too, but I actually just love the pickled beets all by themselves more than I like red beet eggs. So I'm packing my jars fairly full with beet pieces. Like most canning things, you kind of want them to come right up to the neck. And if this is one of the first canning videos you've watched, or you haven't seen it, you got more questions about canning in general, or steam bath canning like I'm about to use here, go check out, go to the channel on Odyssey or YouTube or wherever you're watching, and look for the video. These are the same color, they just didn't all fit in one bowl. Called Canning Questions, and I tried to cover a lot of the basics in there, if that's helpful. Anyway, so I can do 7 quarts here at once in this canner. So we're going to get that going. This, our choy gut or candy stripe beets might fully fill, close to fill this canner all by themselves. And you could do your beets in slices or little dices or any kind of size you like. This is the size I like pretty well. And the main thing is you would want them to be fairly, these aren't obviously not precise, but fairly similar sizes. You don't want a lot of teeny tiny ones and then a lot of real huge chunks of whatever kind of shape you're doing, because that will make it not heat as evenly. So if I put yellow ones in here, they'd turn pale pink because that jar is not full. I'm going to top it off with red ones, and that will make that jar bright red, purple, whatever you want to call that color. So I can get these out of the way. Fill my last jar here. And if you're wondering what we do with these, You can eat them just as a side, either cold or warm. We eat a lot of them on salads. If you're making a big salad, like we do steak salads, you got lots of lettuce and sprouts and various veggies and whatever, it makes a very hearty meal. And pickled beets in that mix is one of the things that we really, really enjoy. So we got our first 7 jars full. Wash some red off my fingers. Be aware, if you're not familiar with it, if you're using red beets, especially those bright red ones, much less so for the pink or the yellow, but if you're using the red, anything that touches them will end up stained pink. Your dish towels, your fingers, pretty much anything. So be aware of that. Okay, so now we are going to just ladle our brine. Give it another good stir here. The house smells like kind of sweet and sour, vinegary scent right now, which I really enjoy. We're going to ladle our hot brine over our mostly still warm beets into our hot jar, and then we're going to get this load in the canner. Okay, so now we're to the part that's like pretty much everything else you've ever seen me can. I'm using this as hot water that my lids are soaking in, and I also use it to, this is more important than with some things, because with beets there's definitely a potential for getting a chunk of something slopped on that ring. What I'm doing is both feeling for any chips or cracks or imperfections in that rim of the jar, or for any bits of food that are slopped onto it. I want that to be all smooth and clean because that's where the jar has to seal. Then I'm putting my warm lid so the rubber's nice and soft onto each of the jars and adding the ring. And this is just going on tight enough that it's like finger tight for me. We want any extra steam and heat and such to be able to vent out of the jar as it's heating in the canner. So we don't need that like cranked down super tight. It's just holding the lid in place onto the rim of the jar. That's all the ring is doing until it's canned and sealed. So I've got that done. Get our burner lid up here. This, if you're not familiar or haven't seen my other videos, is my steam bath canner. You can steam bath anything you can water bath. It's equivalent as far as processing times and kinds of foods you can do. It is not equivalent to a pressure canner, but it is what I use for the vast majority of things that we can. And again, check out that canning questions video if you want to know more about it. So we've got our 7 jars in there. Seat the lid down over here. There is water right up to that little shelf inside that they sit on, and we're going to wait till we see steam come out this hole. When we do, we'll start the timer at my elevation. I'm going to can these for 45 minutes. If you're down at sea level, you probably only need to do 30 minutes. You can check a canning chart for times for your area. So once the steam starts, they're going to go for 40 minutes, then we'll pull those out. In the meantime, I'll be getting jars and such ready and getting the rest of these in a canner as well. It'll probably just make one more canner full. Okay, timer just went off. Turning this off. Let's get my hot pads again. As always, if you're opening something clear full of steam, which a steam bath canner is, open it away from yourself. Don't want any steam burns on anybody's arms and chests and so on. And there is our finished pickled beets. Now, as you're just going to sit here and cool off, I always like to put them on a towel or something, just even though the wood's a pretty good insulator. We don't want any shock in the temperature from the hot to cooling off too rapidly. That could break a jar. They're going to sit here till tomorrow morning, at which point I'll take the rings off, wipe down any stickies that are on them. With this particular food item, there shouldn't be any. And they're going to go in the pantry. And if these guys seal, that jar will be number 251 jars for the year that we've canned that have sealed. Haven't had any not seal, actually, just had 2 that blew out bottoms. 1 steam bath canning and 1 pressure canning. They were both brand new jars. My old ones never break, but sometimes I think there's just a flaw in the glass in new ones, and just blew the bottom out, which is unfortunate. But as long as these guys seal, we haven't had any unsealed yet, and the other canner's running. I can't get 2 canners on this tiny stove at once. It's running on the outside stove, so they'll be done in a minute as well. And that is how I make pickled beets. That's my my grandma, not the one that you guys met if you saw her in a grandmother who had visited me in a video a little while back, but my other grandma who is long since passed away. Thank you to my Aunt Grace for passing on her recipe to me, and it's my version of Grandma's pickled beets.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Come back next time for more adventures.
Thanks for watching.